Keanu Reeves shoved his shoulder against the front bumper of the old pickup one more time and felt the rear wheels spin deeper into the frozen slush. The engine whined hard, then coughed like it was tired of fighting. Snow kept coming sideways, sharp as sand against his face. He stepped back, breathing into his gloves, and looked down at the trench the truck had carved into the road. Each try had only buried it more. The pickup wasn't getting out. For a moment, the only sounds were the wind, the engine, and the thin rattle of something loose under the hood. Then he heard it, not the storm, a child crying. Keanu lifted his head and turned toward the long stretch of highway behind him. At first, he saw nothing but white air and black spruce trees. Then a weak orange flash blinked through the snow. Hazard lights, far back on the shoulder, maybe half a mile, maybe less. A dark SUV sat crooked, almost swallowed by a drift. The cry came again, small, thin, fading. Keanu killed his engine. The sudden silence made the crying sharper. He grabbed the flashlight, pulled the emergency blanket from behind the seat, and started walking into the storm. Snow hit him at the knees in some places. In others, it cracked under his boots like broken glass. The light shook across the road, over ice, over a bent road marker, until it found a woman on her knees beside the SUV. She was trying to wrap her own coat around a little girl pressed to her chest. The mother looked up fast. Her eyes were wide, not with relief but fear. Her lips had turned blue. The little girl's face was white, except for the angry red on her cheeks. One of her mittens was gone. She wasn't crying anymore. That was worse. Keanu stopped a few feet away and kept his voice low. "Hey, I'm here to help." The woman pulled the girl closer. Like help was the one thing life had taught her not to trust. Then Keanu's flashlight moved past her shoulder, and he saw something that made the cold feel even harder. The driver's door of the SUV was hanging open, and a set of fresh footprints led away from the vehicle, off the road and into the dark trees. Keanu didn't ask questions right away. The little girl's head had fallen against her mother's shoulder, in a way he didn't like. He dropped to one knee in the snow. "How long has she been out here?" The woman swallowed. Her jaw was shaking too hard to hold the words steady. "Too long. When did the heat die? Maybe an hour, maybe more. I don't know." He touched the child's mittenless hand. It was so cold it startled him. "What's her name?" "Lily." "Lily," he said softly, leaning close enough for the girl to hear him. "I need you to stay with me." Her eyes opened just a little, dark lashes frozen together at the tips. "Mama," she whispered. "I know." He wrapped the emergency blanket around both of them and looked at the woman again. "What's your name?" "Sarah." "Can you stand?" She nodded, but when she tried, her knees gave out under her. Keanu caught Lily first, then Sarah by the elbow. Sarah flinched when he touched her, not from pain but from habit. It was the kind of flinch that didn't come from weather. It came from history. He looked once toward where the footprints disappeared, then back at the road. His own truck was stuck, and half a mile away. The storm was getting thicker. There was no cell signal out there, and the nearest service station he had passed sat almost 3 miles back, dark except for a utility shed with a rusted light hanging over the door. Keanu made the choice fast. He lifted Lily into his arms. Sarah panicked at once. "No, no, please. I'm not taking her from you," he said. "You walk beside me." She stared at him, searching his face in the flashlight beam, desperate to find a reason not to trust him. All she found was calm, the kind that stays standing when everything else is falling apart. She pushed herself up and took one shaking step, then another. Keanu held Lily tight against his chest and turned them back into the storm. Behind them, the SUV lights blinked again. Once, twice. Then the battery finally died, and the whole road went black. The walk felt longer than it should have. Snow kept blowing over their tracks as if mountain itself wanted to erase them. Keanu leaned forward against the wind, Lily tucked inside his coat and blanket, one arm around her, the flashlight in his other hand. Sarah stumbled beside him, refusing to fall, refusing to let herself be the one who slowed them down. Twice Keanu stopped and rubbed Lily's back through the coat. Twice he made her answer when he spoke. "What color is your backpack?" "Blue." "What did you have for breakfast?" "Crackers." "Good. Keep talking." Sarah kept one hand on Lily's boot the whole walk, like she needed proof her daughter was still there. When the shape of the service shed finally appeared through the snow, it looked less like a building and more like something the storm had forgotten to bury. It was a squat wooden structure beside an abandoned fuel station, with a metal roof and one dim utility light still burning by the side door. Keanu got there first and shoulder-checked the door. Locked. He set Lily carefully into Sarah's arms. took 3 steps back, and hit the door with his boot near the latch. The old frame cracked. He kicked it once more, and the door flew inward with a blast of stale, dusty air. Inside, the shed smelled like oil, wet wood, and old rope, but it was dry and out of the wind. Keanu brought them in, shut the broken door as best he could, and swept his flashlight over the room. Shelves, a workbench, a steel barrel, crates, a stack of old moving blankets. In the corner, a propane heater attached to a half-full tank. "Sit," he said. Sarah lowered Lily onto the blankets, like she was handling glass. Keanu knelt in front of the heater, checked the valve, clicked the striker, and held his breath. Nothing. He adjusted it and clicked again. On the third try, blue flame bloomed to life. Heat began to push slowly into the room. Sarah made a sound then, a small broken sound that was not quite a sob and not quite relief. She pulled Lily close and rubbed her arms hard. Keanu stripped off his outer gloves and crouched in front of the girl. "Lily, can you hear me?" She nodded weakly. "Good. You're doing great." He took the dry blanket off a shelf and wrapped it over her legs. Then he looked up at Sarah's face in the shaky light. There was blood at her hairline. Not much, but enough to notice. "You hit your head?" "I'm fine. That wasn't my question." She looked away. "When the SUV slid," she said. Keanu let that answer sit there. The storm hit the side of the shed with a low, angry moan. He took a flashlight from his bag and set it on the table, pointing upward. Light filled the room in a dim yellow pool. "Do you have water?" Sarah nodded toward a torn canvas bag near the door. Keanu found half a bottle, 2 granola bars, a child's sock, and a phone with a dead screen. He found something else, too, an envelope, thick, sealed. No name on it. He held it up. Sarah's face changed. "Put that back." He did, not because he wasn't curious. Because fear had moved across her face so fast it looked almost like pain. Instead, he opened one granola bar and broke off a piece for Lily. "Small bites," he said. Lily chewed slowly, as if even that took work. Keanu took off his own wool socks and handed them to Sarah. "For her hands." Sarah stared. "They're clean," he said. Her mouth trembled, despite how hard she tried to hold herself together. She slid the warm socks over Lily's hands like mittens and tucked them under the blanket. After a minute, Lily's eyes lifted to Keanu's face. "You're that man." He smiled just a little. "Sometimes. My dad liked your movies, past tense." Sarah shut her eyes, just for a second. The room got quieter after that. Not because the storm softened, but because something had been named, without anyone meaning to name it. Keanu moved to the broken door and wedged a crate against it. Then he checked the small back window. Snow had already drifted halfway up the glass. "Was someone with you?" he asked without turning around. Sarah did not answer. He looked down at the floorboards. Melted snow. Mud. A second set of prints had been inside before them. Larger boots. Recent. He turned back slowly. "The footprints by the SUV," he said. "Who walked into the trees?" Sarah's hand moved on instinct, pulling Lily closer. "No one. That's not true. I said no one." Lily's fingers tightened around the blanket. Her voice came out small and rough. "It was the man in the brown coat." Sarah looked at her daughter so fast it was almost a plea. "Lily." "He said he was coming back," the girl whispered. "But he took the keys." The propane heater hissed softly between them. Keanu stayed still. "Who is he?" he asked. Sarah's face emptied in that strange way people's faces do when they are too tired to keep lying and too scared to tell the truth. For a long time, she said nothing. Then she spoke so quietly the storm almost took the words. "My brother-in-law found us." Keanu didn't push harder. Not then. Lily needed warmth. Sarah needed time. Out in the woods, somewhere beyond the shed walls, a man in a brown coat had walked away from a freezing child. That told Keanu enough for the moment. He found an old kettle on the shelf, melted snow in it over the propane flame, and made lukewarm water they could sip without shocking their bodies. He tore strips from a shop towel, dampened one, and cleaned the blood near Sarah's temple. She flinched again when he touched her. This time he noticed the fading yellow mark near her wrist. Not from a car slide. Not new. When he finished, he stepped back and pretended not to see the shame rise in her eyes. Lily had begun to shake less. It was good. But now she looked so tired it scared him. "No sleeping yet," he said gently. "Talk to me." She nodded once. "What's your favorite food?" "Pancakes." "What? Too much syrup," she said. That got the smallest smile out of Sarah. Keanu saw it and held onto it like a sign of life. "Then when this storm lets up," he said, "we'll find you the kind with too much syrup." Lily looked at him carefully, like children do when they're deciding if a promise belongs in the real world or the pretend one. "Really? Really?" Her eyes closed for 1 second, then opened again. Sarah watched him with that same careful look. Not soft, not warm yet, but different, as if some small locked part of her had heard the word promise and wanted, against all reason, to believe it. Hours crawled by in that shed. Keanu fed the heater. Sarah rubbed warmth back into Lily's feet. Snow hammered the roof, then eased, then came back hard again. Sometime after midnight, the wind finally dropped enough for the silence outside to feel unnatural. Keanu stood and listened. No storm, no road noise. Then faint but clear, the crunch of boots outside. Sarah heard it too. Her whole body went rigid. Lily sat up so fast the blanket slipped from her shoulders. The shadow moved past the small frosted window. Stopped. Keanu did not waste a second. He took the tire iron from the corner, stepped in front of Sarah and Lily, and moved toward the door. The handle turned once, slowly, then harder. A man's voice came through the wood. "Sarah, open up." No anger in the tone. That was what made it worse. Sarah looked like the blood had drained right out of her. Keanu braced the door with one hand. "Who is he?" Her lips barely moved. "Daryl." The man outside knocked again, polite and steady. "You're scaring Lily," he called through the door. "Open the door and let's go home." Lily buried her face against her mother. He looked at the broken frame, the weak lock, the woman holding her breath behind him, and the child who already knew too much about that voice. Then he answered for them. "They're not going anywhere." There was a pause outside, long enough for the temperature in the room to seem to drop. Then the man spoke again, colder now. "You don't know what this is." Keanu tightened his grip on the tire iron. "No," he said, "but I know what I heard on the road. A little girl freezing while somebody walked away." Nothing came back through the door for several seconds. Then the boots stepped away from the shed, around it, toward the rear. Keanu's eyes flashed to the back window, and Sarah suddenly whispered the words that changed everything. "He says Lily belongs to him." The back of the shed had another entrance, half blocked by shelves and old tools. Keanu reached it 3 seconds before the latch moved. He shoved a rusted cabinet against the door, just as something heavy hit it from the other side. The whole wall shook. Lily screamed. Sarah wrapped herself around her daughter. Another hit, then another. Keanu planted his boots and held the cabinet in place with his shoulder. The heater rattled. Dust shook down from the rafters. He could hear the man outside breathing hard now, his patience gone. "Sarah," the voice barked. "You are making this worse." Keanu looked over at her. "Call anyone?" "There's no signal." He checked his own phone again, though he knew better. Nothing. Another slam hit the door. The hinges shrieked. Keanu scanned the room fast. In the corner near the workbench sat an old emergency flare gun, red and dusty, probably forgotten there years ago. He lunged for it, broke it open, and found one flare still inside. He turned to Sarah. "When I say, cover Lily's ears." He moved to the front door, kicked the crate aside, and yanked the broken door open. Daryl Mercer stood 10 feet away in the snow, broad-shouldered, expensive parka, brown coat underneath. His face was wind-burned and handsome, in the careful way some men wear kindness like a suit, not a monster. That was the trouble. He looked like the kind of man people believed. He lifted both hands slightly when he saw Keanu. "Easy," he said. "This is a family issue." Keanu raised the flare gun. Daryl blinked once. "Walk away." The man's eyes flicked over Keanu's face in recognition, but he recovered fast. "You have no idea what she's done. Walk away." Daryl looked past him into the shed. "Sarah, sweetheart, tell him. Tell him you're confused. Tell him you need help." Sarah said nothing. Lily's crying had gone quiet, the kind of quiet that meant terror had turned inward. Daryl took one step closer. Keanu fired. The flare exploded into the dark with a blinding scream of red light, arcing over the station and burning through the snowy sky like a distress signal from another world. Daryl threw up an arm and stumbled back. For 1 second, the whole highway glowed blood red. Keanu shut the door again. "What did you just do?" Sarah whispered. "Made noise." They waited. At first, nothing happened. Then, somewhere far down the road, an engine answered. Not close, but coming. Daryl must have heard it too, because his boots crunched away from the shed fast. A few seconds later, another engine started in the distance. He had parked farther back off the road. Tires spun, then faded. Keanu exhaled slowly. 20 minutes later, an Alaska State Trooper truck pulled into the old station lot. The officer took one look at Lily, one look at Sarah's face, one look at the broken doors, and stopped treating the night like a weather call. His name was Tom Barrett, mid-50s, quiet eyes. The kind of man who didn't waste words because he had learned most truth, came in the silence after them. He got them into the warm truck, radioed for medical support, and listened. Sarah gave almost nothing at first. Name, daughter's name, vehicle trouble, storm. But when Barrett asked who the man in the brown coat was, Lily answered before Sarah could stop her. Uncle Darrell. No one spoke for a second after that. At the small clinic in Talk, the lights were too bright, and the heat smelled like bleach and old coffee. A nurse wrapped Lily in warmed blankets, checked her fingers and toes, and said they had brought her in just in time. Sarah had a mild concussion and bruising along her arm that did not match her story about sliding in the car. Keanu sat in the waiting area with a paper cup of bad coffee cooling in his hands. He should have left by then. Anybody else might have. He had done the rescue. He had stayed through the storm. The troopers were there. The clinic was safe. But through the open exam room door, he saw Lily wake up and search the room until she found him. Only then did she let her eyes close again. So he stayed. Morning came pale and hard through the clinic windows. The snow had stopped. Everything outside looked clean in the cruel way fresh snow always does, like the night had never happened. Trooper Barrett came in with a file tucked under one arm. I ran the name, he said quietly, standing near Keanu's chair. Daryl Mercer owns a freight company out of Anchorage. No criminal convictions. A few civil complaints that never went anywhere. And Sarah? Widow. Husband died 2 years ago in a trucking accident north of Glen Allen. Since then, a custody petition was filed by the brother-in-law 3 months ago. Keanu looked up. For the child? Barrett nodded. Claimed neglect, financial instability, emotional impairment after bereavement. Keanu's jaw tightened. Any proof? Not enough for full custody, but enough noise to keep her scared. Barrett glanced toward the exam room. She didn't tell me everything. Yet. Keanu turned the paper cup in his hands. She will if she thinks it matters. Barrett studied him for a second. She trusts you. Keanu gave the smallest shake of his head. No. She trusts what I did. That's more useful. By noon, Lily was sitting up, eating dry toast and staring at the snow outside the window. Sarah sat on the side of the bed, one hand on her daughter's ankle under the blanket, as if touch alone could keep the world from taking her. Keanu knocked lightly on the frame before stepping in. I found a diner down the street, he said. Smells like pancakes. Lily looked up fast. With syrup? Reckless amounts. That finally pulled a real smile out of her. Sarah almost smiled too, then caught herself. I can pay you back, she said. Keanu leaned against the doorframe. For pancakes? For everything. He looked around the room. The chipped paint. The too thin blanket. The plastic cup of water on the tray. No, he said. The answer was so simple it made Sarah blink. That afternoon, after the doctor cleared Lily for discharge with strict rest, Keanu drove them to the diner himself because his truck had finally been pulled free, and the clinic staff trusted him more than they trusted Chance. The diner smelled faintly of butter, bacon, coffee, and wet boots drying by the door. Lily sat in the booth by the window, wearing one of the clinic's oversized sweaters over her shirt, and stared at the menu like it was a miracle. Sarah kept scanning the parking lot between every 2 bites, her body still living in the emergency, even while the room around her tried to act normal. Keanu noticed but said nothing. He just cut Lily's pancakes into small pieces and slid the syrup toward her. You weren't kidding, she said. I try not to lie before breakfast. She laughed then, a small rusty sound, like something that had not been used in too long. Sarah looked at her daughter laughing and turned her face toward the window. Keanu pretended not to see her wipe at her eye. After the meal, Lily went quiet, heavy with warmth and safety, and the crash that comes after fear. Keanu took off his coat and draped it over her while she slept against the booth. Sarah watched him do it. You don't have to stay, she said softly. I know. Why are you? Keanu looked out at the white street, the parked trucks, the old gas pumps buried in snow. Because last night wasn't over when the storm stopped. That was the first honest answer Sarah seemed to believe. So she gave him one back. My husband's name was Ben, she said. Daryl was his older brother. After Ben died, Daryl said he wanted to help. He handled the insurance, the trucking company paperwork, the bills, everything. Her fingers tightened around the coffee mug. At first I thought I was lucky. I had Lily. I had grief up to my throat. I had no idea what papers meant what. Daryl showed up with groceries. Paid the heating bill once. Talked to the bank. Everybody said I should be grateful. And then grateful started sounding a lot like obedient. She stared at the black coffee. He wanted signatures all the time. Power of attorney. Property review. Temporary guardianship if my health got worse. Emergency school authorization. Little things, he called them, just in case. Keanu didn't interrupt. Ben left us a small house and a life insurance policy, Sarah said. Not much, but enough to keep us standing if I was careful. Then Daryl started saying there were debts Ben never told me about. Company advances, repairs, legal obligations. I didn't understand half of it. Every time I asked questions, I got another stack of papers. She swallowed hard. 3 months ago, Lily came home crying because Daryl had picked her up from school without telling me. Said he was just being helpful. Said she needed family. That night he told me, maybe it was time I admitted I couldn't do this alone. Lily shifted in her sleep under Keanu's coat. Sarah's voice dropped. He said if I fought him, people would ask why a little girl was living in a house with shut-off notices, and a mother who still woke up, screaming from nightmares. Keanu's face stayed still, but something in his eyes darkened. What changed? Sarah looked down at her hands. Ben left me a letter. I didn't know it existed until last week. Lily found it in an old toolbox in the garage, tucked inside a broken flashlight. There were papers with it, copies of maintenance reports, notes Ben made, a photograph, and a key. Keanu thought of the sealed envelope in the bag. The envelope. She nodded. I was driving to Fairbanks to meet a lawyer my cousin told me about. Someone outside Anchorage. Someone Daryl didn't know. What happened on the road? Sarah let out a long breath that shook all the way through her. A man in a brown coat started following me after Delta Junction. I stopped once for gas and saw him watching. I drove faster. The SUV started pulling to one side, then it died. He stopped behind us about 10 minutes later. Said he was there to help. She gave a dry, broken laugh. He took my phone, said he needed a better signal by the trees. Then he came back without it and told me Daryl only wanted to talk. When I said no, he smiled, like I was a difficult child. He took the keys and said if I kept making bad choices, Lily would suffer for them. Keanu's jaw set, and then he walked away. Sarah nodded. In that cold. He just walked away. The diner door opened and a blast of winter air rolled in. Sarah flinched so hard the coffee rippled in her cup. Keanu said nothing for a moment. Then very gently, where's the key? Sarah looked at Lily. She has it. Lily's eyes were still closed, but one hand had curled around the neck of her sweater, around something hidden beneath it. That night, Barrett arranged rooms for them in a small roadside lodge, owned by an older couple who knew when not to ask questions. Keanu took the room across the hall. He didn't hover. He fixed the broken chain lock on Sarah's door. He bought groceries. He found Lily a pair of wool mittens with tiny blue stars stitched on them. He sat with Barrett in the office and made calls that opened doors faster than ordinary calls might have. Not flashy calls, quiet ones. A lawyer, a private investigator, a retired judge Barrett trusted. Sarah watched all of it with the stunned look of someone who had spent too long learning that help always came with a bill. The next morning, Lily came down to the lobby in her new mittens and found Keanu trying to get the lodge's ancient vending machine to release a packet of crackers. It likes you less than it likes me, Lily said. Most machines do. She pressed the right corner, hit the glass once with the flat of her mitten, and the crackers fell. Keanu stared at the machine. I'm not proud of how impressed I am. Lily held out the crackers. You can have some. That was how trust began. Not in a courtroom, not in a speech. In a warm lodge lobby that smelled faintly of coffee and pine cleaner, where a little girl offered half a packet of crackers to a man who had carried her out of the snow. Over the next 2 days, the walls inside Sarah began to loosen 1 inch at a time. Lily drew pictures at the breakfast table. First the storm, then the shed, then Keanu with a flashlight larger than his body. Sarah laughed when she saw it, and the laugh sounded surprised to hear itself. At dinner, Lily asked if movie people ever got lonely. Keanu answered without drama. Sure. What do you do then? Drive too far, drink coffee too late, try to be useful. Lily considered that. That's not a bad answer. Sarah looked down at her soup so he wouldn't see the soft look in her eyes. Small things kept happening. Keanu noticed Lily always folded the paper napkins into squares before eating, as if neatness could keep the day from going wrong. He noticed Sarah never sat with her back to a door. He noticed Lily talked about her father in present tense by accident, then got quiet every time she did. So he made room for quiet. One afternoon, he found Lily sitting by the window with the key hanging from a string around her neck. What's it for? He asked. She looked down at it. Daddy told me if Mama was ever scared and I was scared too, I should keep it safe till she knew who to trust. The child said it simply, but there was nothing simple in it. He told you that? She nodded. The week before he died. He kissed my forehead and said, if grown-ups act strange, don't let the key go. I thought it was a game. Her eyes filled before she could stop them. I didn't know he was saying goodbye. Keanu sat beside her and waited. After a minute, she leaned against his arm, careful at first, then fully, the way children do when they decide you are solid enough to rest on. In the room upstairs, Sarah finally opened the sealed envelope. She did it with Keanu and Barrett there, because fear had gotten too heavy to carry alone. Inside were photocopied inspection logs from Mercer Freight. Several pages had Ben's handwriting in the margins. Dates, mechanical warnings, brake failures, pressure complaints ignored. There was also a handwritten letter from Ben to Sarah, folded twice and stained at one corner, as if he had carried it in a pocket. Sarah read that part aloud, only because her hands were shaking too hard to hold the page steady in silence. If anything happens to me, don't trust Daryl with the company files. He has been changing records. I kept copies. Ruth Hall knows. There is a box at First Northern in Fairbanks, key enclosed separately. I wanted to tell you sooner, but I kept hoping I was wrong about my own brother. Sarah stopped reading there. Her breath caught on the last line. I'm sorry. The room went still. Trooper Barrett took the papers one by one, reading them with the careful patience of a man who knew details could put handcuffs on powerful people. Who's Ruth Hall? Keanu asked. Sarah wiped her face. Ben worked with a mechanic named Ruth years ago. She retired to a fishing town near Fairbanks, I think. I haven't seen her since the funeral. Barrett looked up from the documents. If she knows what these are, she matters. He tapped the bank reference. And so does that box. Keanu didn't waste time. By evening, arrangements were made. Barrett would escort Sarah and Lily to Fairbanks in an unmarked vehicle. Keanu would follow separately. The retired judge had helped get an emergency protective order drafted based on the highway incident and the child endangerment report. It wasn't the end, but it was a crack in the wall. Before they left, Sarah stood with Keanu in the lodge parking lot, while Lily slept in the back seat wrapped in a blanket. I keep waiting for this to turn, she said quietly. Every good thing lately turns. Keanu looked at the snowy horizon. Maybe, but not all at once. She gave a tired half-law. You always talk like that? Only when I don't know what to say. That answer made her look at him differently. Not like a famous man, like a man. Fairbanks brought a different kind of cold, cleaner streets, bigger buildings, more people. But fear came with them anyway. At the bank, the manager led them to a narrow private room with gray walls and a metal table. Sarah's hands trembled so hard she could barely fit the key into the lockbox. When it finally clicked open, everyone leaned in. Inside were three things: a flash drive, a second envelope, and a small photograph of Ben, standing with an older woman in grease-stained coveralls beside a truck bay. On the back, written in Ben's hand, were the words, "Ruth won't lie." Barrett exhaled through his nose. There's your witness. The second envelope contained notarized statements Ben had prepared but never filed, naming specific dates when safety complaints were altered. There were also copies of transfer papers showing Daryl had moved money from a death benefit account into a company holding account 3 weeks after Ben died. Sarah stared at the papers like they might burn her. He told me the insurance was delayed, she whispered. Barrett's face hardened. Looks like he wasn't waiting on the insurance. He was waiting on you not knowing. The flash drive was taken directly to a forensic tech Barrett trusted. It contained scanned maintenance files, voicemail recordings, and one short video Ben had recorded in the cab of his truck. Grainy, tired face, road noise in the background. If anything happens, Ben said into the camera. This truck should never have been cleared. I reported the brake issue twice. Daryl told dispatch to sign off anyway. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. If I'm right, don't let him bury it. Sarah covered her mouth with both hands. Lily was in the hall with a social worker, coloring on printer paper. She couldn't hear it. Thank God. But the danger grew the same hour the truth did. Daryl Mercer filed an emergency motion, claiming Sarah had fled the state with Lily after a mental health episode, assisted by strangers. He arrived in Fairbanks with 2 lawyers and the smooth confidence of a man who had always found the room leaning his way. The hearing was set for the next morning because the protective order and the custody motion had collided in all the worst ways. That night, Sarah almost broke. In the safe apartment Barrett arranged for them, she stood in the kitchen with both hands on the counter and said the words she had been holding back for months. What if he wins? Keanu was at the table with a stack of copied documents. He won't. No, he said. I know this. He's been winning because you were alone. Her eyes flooded at once. That's not the same thing. It is, tonight. She turned away, shoulders shaking, not loud. Somehow quiet crying is always harder to watch. I should have known, she whispered. Ben tried to tell me things. I was tired. Lily was sick that winter. Bills were coming. I told him not to bring work stress home. If I had listened. Keanu stood, walked over, and set a mug of tea beside her hand. No grand comfort, no perfect words. Just warmth. You were trying to keep your family together, he said. She cried harder then. Because kindness often breaks the last part of a person that is still pretending to be made of stone. The next morning, the courthouse smelled like wet wool and floor polish. People had come. Word had spread because small cities run on whispers faster than highways run on fuel. Some came for Daryl. Some came because they remembered Ben Mercer as a decent man. Some came because they had heard a famous actor was involved and wanted a glimpse. But when the hearing began, the room stopped belonging to gossip. It belonged to truth. Daryl sat in a dark suit, clean-shaven, steady, almost bored. The kind of man who looked respectable under fluorescent lights. His lawyer painted Sarah exactly the way men like Daryl always try to paint women they are cornering. Fragile, unstable, confused by grief, prone to impulsive decisions, endangering her child with reckless flight on dangerous roads. Sarah listened with both hands clenched in her lap until the knuckles blanched white. Lily sat outside the courtroom with Barrett and a woman from Child Services, drawing little blue stars on a notebook. When it was Sarah's turn, her voice shook at first. Then it steadied. She told the story of the signatures, the pressure, the school pickup, the dead SUV, the man in the brown coat, the cold. Daryl's lawyer smiled politely through most of it. Then Barrett testified. Then the clinic nurse testified about the condition of Sarah's bruises and Lily's near hypothermia. Then the forensic tech testified about the files on the flash drive. Then came the first crack in Daryl's face. Barrett introduced the transfer records. The courtroom went still. Daryl's lawyer objected. The judge overruled. Then the video of Ben played. Not loudly. It didn't need to be loud. Ben's tired face filled the small courtroom monitor. Road noise hissed in the speakers. His eyes looked straight into the lens with the helpless courage of a man who knows saying the truth may not save him. But silence will certainly bury him. If I'm right, he said, don't let him bury it. Sarah bowed her head. On the other side of the room, Daryl Mercer finally moved. Just a shift in the jaw, a tightening at the temple. But it was the first sign that control was slipping. Then came the witness from the photograph. Ruth Hall walked into court wearing a plain coat, sensible boots, and the expression of a woman too old to be impressed by anybody's money. Her hair was white. Her back had the slight bend of years, spent under hoods and truck frames. But her voice came out sharp and clean. She had brought her own copies, paper records, dates, work orders, a pocket notebook from the year Ben died. I told Ben not to drive Unit 14, she said. Brake line pressure was unstable in cold conditions. I wrote it up. Next day, the complaint disappeared from the official file. She looked directly at Daryl. Didn't disappear from mine. Daryl's lawyer tried to shake her. She didn't move. Then Barrett played a voicemail, recovered from Sarah's old phone account. The quality was poor, but Daryl's voice was clear enough. You sign by Friday, Sarah, or people are going to start asking whether Lily is safe with you. The room changed after that. You can feel it when truth stops sounding like accusation and starts sounding like proof. The air itself gets heavier. Daryl took the stand against his lawyer's advice. Men like him often do, because control is a habit, and habits die hard. He said he had only been trying to help. He said Ben had been emotional. He said Sarah misread documents because grief clouded her judgment. He said the money transfers were temporary administrative moves. He said the voicemail was taken out of context. Then Keanu's eyes moved to the back of the room. A man in a brown coat had just walked in. State troopers on either side. The room rustled with whispers. It was the man from the highway. His name was Wade Collins, a Mercer Company driver. Barrett had picked him up at a motel before dawn, after tracing his truck home from gas station footage near Delta Junction. Wade looked wrecked, no swagger left, just stale fear and no sleep. He sat down, was sworn in, and for a second looked at Daryl the way a drowning man looks at the person who handed him the weight. Then he spoke. Daryl had ordered him to follow Sarah, to persuade her to turn around, to take the keys if necessary, to leave them in the car a while. Wade said, staring at his own hands. He said nobody gets hurt if they get scared enough. Sarah made a sound so raw that even the judge paused. Wade went on. He admitted. Daryl had promised to fix his debt problems if he handled it. He admitted he took Sarah's phone. He admitted he walked away knowing a storm was coming. He admitted he did not go back because by the time guilt hit him, he had seen another vehicle stop and was afraid of getting caught. Darryl shot to his feet and called him a liar, not in lawyer language, not polished, just pure panic. The judge banged once for order, but the damage was done. Respectable masks rarely survive surprise. Then came the last open loop. The second envelope from the lockbox had held one more page no one understood at first. A handwritten note from Ben that read, "Ask about the memorial account." Barrett had done exactly that. Now he slid the bank records forward. A memorial trust created by Ben's mother years before for Lily's future had been quietly reassigned under emergency management clauses. Darryl drafted himself after Ben's death, not illegal on its face, but combined with the false pressure, the altered safety records, and the custody petition, the motive became visible to everyone in the room. This had never been about concern. It had been about control. Control of the company liability, control of the insurance money, control of Lily's trust, control of Sarah, all of it. Darryl's face lost color as the pieces locked together. He tried to speak over Barrett, over the lawyers, over the judge. It didn't matter. Because for the first time, he wasn't the only man in the room holding paperwork. He wasn't the only one sounding sure. He wasn't the only one people believed. The judge issued an immediate protective order, extend state protections for Sarah and Lily. Temporary sole custody remained with Sarah. The court referred the financial records and the trucking documents to the state attorney general's office and federal transport investigators. Wade Collins was remanded for criminal charges connected to child endangerment and unlawful coercion. Darryl Mercer was ordered to surrender his passport and remain available pending formal investigation. It wasn't a movie ending. No gavel sent him straight to prison that second. Real justice often walks instead of runs, but it had started. And sometimes, for people who have been trapped a long time, the beginning of justice feels like breathing after years underwater. Outside the courthouse, snow drifted softly in the afternoon light. Reporters had gathered by then, cameras, questions, flashing lights. Darryl tried to push past them, but no one wanted his practiced smile anymore. Troopers moved with him down the steps. Sarah stood frozen at the top of the stairs, the cold air touching her face. The whole city opening in front of her like a road she had forgotten was there. Lily came out holding Barrett's hand. "Mama?" Sarah dropped to her knees and opened her arms. Lily ran into them. The sound Sarah made when she held her daughter was not neat or quiet or pretty. It was grief leaving the body. It was terror finally being told it could let go. Keanu stood a little to the side, hands in his coat pockets, giving them the space people deserve when their life starts over. Lily looked up from her mother's shoulder and reached one mittened hand toward him. He came over. She grabbed his fingers. "Did we win?" she whispered. Keanu looked at Sarah. Sarah looked back through wet eyes that somehow held the first real peace he had seen there. "We're safe," she said. For Lily, that was answer enough. The weeks after were not magic. Healing never is. Sarah and Lily stayed in Fairbanks at first, under state protection, while investigators pulled at every thread Darryl had left hanging. More complaints surfaced. A dispatcher came forward, then a former bookkeeper, then 2 drivers who had buried their own doubts. Because men with mortgages and pride often do that until one brave thing makes bravery contagious. Sarah gave statements until her voice went flat with exhaustion. Lily had nightmares and woke crying for the sound of tires in snow. Some mornings Sarah could not stop checking the locks. Some afternoons Lily refused to let her mother out of sight even to shower. But now there were people around them who understood that fear does not end just because danger leaves the room. Keanu visited when he could, quietly, no publicity, no cameras. He brought coloring books once, and a heavy cast-iron griddle another time, because he remembered a promise about pancakes. The little rental house they moved into a month later smelled faintly of fresh paint, laundry soap, and the bread Sarah learned to bake again on days when her hands were steady enough. Keanu showed up one Sunday carrying grocery bags and found Lily standing on a chair helping mix batter. "You're late," she told him. "I was told noon. It's pancake noon." He accepted the correction. The kitchen filled with the smell of butter, cinnamon, and warm flour. Snow light came through the window over the sink. Sarah laughed when Lily insisted Keanu's pancake looked like a map of a broken state. It was not a loud house. Not yet, but it had become a house where laughter could happen without asking permission. Therapy helped. Time helped. Truth helped most of all. One evening after Lily had gone to bed, Sarah sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and told Keanu the part she had never said out loud. "I stayed too long," she said. "Not just with Daryl, with all of it. The papers, the threats, the way he spoke to me in my own house. I knew something was wrong. I kept thinking if I could just stay calm enough, good enough, organized enough, then he'd stop." Keanu looked at the steam rising from his mug. "That's what people like him count on." She nodded slowly. "I hate that Lily saw any of it." He was quiet a moment. "Lily also saw you get up and keep going." Sarah's eyes filled, but this time she didn't hide it. Months turned. Charges grew. Investigators tied Ben's death to a chain of ignored safety failures. Civil suits reopened. Financial crimes followed. Daryl's company began to fold under audits. Testimony, and the sudden disappearance of fear from people who had once protected him by staying silent. He was not brought down by one dramatic punch. He was brought down by records, witnesses, patience, and the simple power of truth staying in the room long enough. Sarah found work first at a bakery, then part-time helping manage accounts for a community center. Because somewhere under all the years of surviving, she was still good with numbers when no one was using numbers against her. Lily started school again. At first, she barely spoke above a whisper. Then a teacher discovered she could draw almost anything she saw. Wolves, trucks, mountains, the old lodge. A flashlight in a storm. Her pictures were full of light breaking through dark places. On the anniversary of the rescue, Lily handed Keanu a folded page. It was a drawing of 3 figures in a snowstorm. A little girl, a mother, a man with a light. Above them she had written, in careful uneven letters, "You stayed." Keanu kept it. He would keep it for the rest of his life. What changed their lives forever was not one act. It was what grew out of that act. With Barrett and a few local families, Sarah helped start a winter emergency network along the most dangerous stretch of the highway. Warm sheds were stocked, reflective markers were added, volunteer drivers checked routes before storms. The project got a name from Lily, who thought for a long time and finally said, "People need a light when they think nobody sees them," so they called it the Lantern Route. Keanu funded most of it and told almost no one. He also quietly paid for a memorial scholarship in Ben Mercer's name for children of truck drivers lost on Alaska roads. Sarah cried when she found out, not because of the money, because someone had remembered Ben as more than the way he died. Years later, people along that highway still told the story differently. Some said a famous actor saved a mother and child in a storm. Some said a brave widow took on a powerful man and won. Some said a dead husband reached back through time with a letter and a key to save his family. All of them were true, but none of them were the whole truth. The whole truth was quieter than that. It lived in ordinary mornings. In Lily heading to school with paint under one fingernail and confidence in her step. In Sarah sleeping through the night with the chain lock untouched. In a kitchen that smelled like coffee and pancakes. In the fact that when winter came now, fear was no longer the only thing waiting at the window. One spring afternoon, nearly 3 years after the storm, Sarah stood outside the community center, while children painted wooden lanterns for a fundraiser. The snow had melted into long, wet fields. The air smelled of thawing earth and pine. Lily, taller now, ran across the grass with a box of markers. "Mom," she called, "Mr. Barrett says my stars look crooked." "They do," Barrett said from behind her, smiling. "They're artistic," Lily corrected. Keanu pulled up a few minutes later in a dusty truck and stepped out wearing the same calm he had carried into the storm that night. Lily ran to him without thinking and threw her arms around his waist. He hugged her back like it was the most natural thing in the world. Sarah watched them and felt that old ache in her chest, but now it was not fear. It was gratitude big enough to hurt. She walked over. "There's coffee inside," she said. "Still too strong?" "The way you like it." They stood there for a second under the clear Alaska sky while children laughed nearby and wind moved softly through the trees. No one said much. They didn't need to. Because sometimes the deepest changes in a life do not arrive with thunder. Sometimes they begin in the smallest possible moment. A stranger hears a child crying. A tired man keeps walking into the storm instead of away from it. A mother decides, after too much pain, to trust one good thing. And from that single choice, everything begins to turn. People like to believe lives change because of grand speeches, perfect timing, or miracles that fall out of the sky. But most of the time, lives change because one person stays. One person believes what fear has tried to erase. One person stands in the doorway and says, "They're not going anywhere." The storm that night could have taken everything. Instead, it revealed everything. It revealed what greed looks like when light hits it. It revealed how strong a frightened mother can be when she stops apologizing for surviving. It revealed that a little girl can carry a key longer than grown men can carry a lie. And it revealed something simple, something easy to miss in a world that moves too fast and looks away too often. Kindness is not small. Protection is not small. Showing up is not small. Sometimes the biggest thing a human being can do is refuse to walk past someone else's pain. Because now and then, on the coldest road at the worst possible hour, a life changes forever for only one reason. Someone chooses not to leave.